It is so vivid. It is ridiculous. First day, I had made a lofty goal of talking to 100 people before we had several layovers, and I'm just like, we're gonna have all this time. We had an 8-hour plus layover in London, and so I was just like, well, we'll just talk to every single person in the whatever, the international terminal at Heathrow. And it didn't go as well as I would have hoped, and it became extraordinarily awkward because you can't really just go from one person to the person like sitting next to them. Like, hey, they didn't want to talk to me. I know you just heard it. And then like half the people didn't even speak English. Didn't meet my goal. My companion spent a good couple hours on the phone. So I spent a lot of time next to the phone as we were traveling. Got into country, and the mission home's in Riga, down in Latvia. So we got in, met our trainers. I don't really remember a ton about that. And then we stayed maybe a couple of hours, and then we hopped on a bus. And I was headed to Tartu, which is in southeastern Estonia, second largest city. And in fact, there's only 4 cities actually open in the country, 3 of which are Estonian speaking. The other one is on the Russian border and isn't open to Estonian missionaries because there's just no Estonian speakers there. And things kind of changed from time to time. I know that the mission president had talked about closing down one of those cities, and other cities have opened, but they're not really large enough to really sustain missionaries for very long. But anyways, onwards. I remember the border crossing and seeing the guys with the guns and just being like, oh, this is a little intimidating. And then we got off the bus, and I honestly felt like I was in a war-torn, like, Eastern Europe. It's changed. It changed in the time that I was there, so it's not like, but when I got there, there was a giant hole in the ground. All the buildings were a little bit run down. My companion, my MTC companion and his trainer took a taxi to another part of town, and my companion's like, okay, we're walking, and it's, it's mid-November, so it's a little chilly outside for northeastern Europe, and just remember pulling my luggage through the bus station was being rebuilt, and the old one was still kind of standing there. It was old, decrepit. Pretty much when you look at old pictures of Russia, that's what I was looking at. I was just like, holy cow, like this is... they were deciding to rebuild the mall in the area, and they had dug out a big hole where they were going to be putting the new mall in, but then they came across some ruins, and so some archaeological people had come in, and I didn't know that at the time, but there was just a giant hole in the ground that was just sitting there. It looked horrible. We walk over to our apartment building, and we open the door, and we walk into the stairwell, and it's this old nasty green paint that's kind of like just flaking off the concrete walls. And we walk up a flight of stairs, and we open this door that looks like a bomb shelter door. It's just like this huge, thick metal door, and we walk in, and it is freezing. Like the temperature has not changed from the point I got off the bus, walking up the stairwell into the bedroom. Like the temperature had not changed. And I'm just like, it is still like 37 degrees in here. Like, what is going on? And I look down, and the floor creaks, and it's just painted plywood. And I walk in, and they're like, well, your bed's right there. And I'm like, sweet. They hand me a blanket that, I'm tall, I'm 6'4", didn't go over my entire body. And so for the next couple of days, I really, really struggled to sleep, mostly because I was just cold. Later, I come to find out that my trainer, well, there had been some problems earlier in the mission with finances, and they were really struggling with finances. Things got sorted out, but my trainer was who I ended up sending home. Like, he went home after our training period. He was just stuck in the whole premise of use as little as possible. And so it wasn't the fact that we couldn't have heat. It was just the point that he didn't feel like heat was necessary. And so that was a treat in itself. And my training period was difficult. I served in an old wooden part of town where most of the buildings were old wooden buildings. The people were not what I would call middle class or lower middle class even. Most of them were struggling. Most of them lived in 1-2 bedroom or 1 or 2 room apartments. A good portion of the members kind of lived where we were. They lived, some of them lived in, I don't know, I mean, I think people who lived in the 1800s, we're talking, 19th century people probably had better housing than they did. Just floorboards, a bunch of walls, all their stuff piled up into a corner, a sink in the corner, and a bed. Taught several people that first time. Never had seen poor in that manner of poor. I saw, people that we were teaching having to use a bucket in the corner of their room as a restroom, as opposed to, and it was just something, because we jokingly at the MTC were sent to the third world. We had to go to the third world training before we left. And we're like, this isn't third world, Africa's third world. It's just like, it's not that bad. And it honestly wasn't. And the government's made great strides in the past couple of years to make sure that living conditions for all their people have gone up. But things, I mean, there's a great disparity between people with money and people with hardly anything. And that's the amazing thing, because I wasn't necessarily prepared for that. I lived in Utah my entire life. I wasn't expecting to go to this country, which I thought was, economically speaking, okay. But to run into people that were living in those kind of conditions and were members of the church was something that really, really caught me off guard, was that they were still happy. And that was the great thing, that we were teaching this guy, and he lived with his daughter in, I don't know what you would call it, like a 2-room hut, pretty much a room that was used as a kitchen, and then a room that was used as their bedroom. And their electricity consisted of pretty much one light that hung from the middle of the room. And he was sad because the government were kicking him out of his home and putting him somewhere nicer. So he was frustrated that he was losing his home. And obviously where he was going was going to be better, but it wasn't his home. So, there's an element of pride with the people too. So especially with the Russians coming in, and then the Nazis coming in, and then the Russians coming in again, trying to get rid of the Russians, finally getting rid of the Russians, and now prospering on their own. It's quite amazing. Very proud people of what they have accomplished, especially by the means they've done it. And I think that really stands testament to them, that they've gained their independence through not necessarily fighting, but standing tall and representing what they do. I mean, the singing revolution to me which is what they call them gaining their freedom. That by itself is a testament to me what can be done through Christ-like example. And I don't think they realize that. They're a lot better off than I think they realize. So my training period, it was hard. Gets dark 2 in the afternoon. Sun doesn't come up until like 10, 11, It's not 10 or 11, it's more like 9, but it's still, that was a shocker. I haven't lived up north. So that was something to adjust to, just not getting light, which can can be kind of depressing. I know missionaries over in Finland were even told to go tanning in tanning booths. We never did that, but I was told that happened up there, because that was a hard thing, trying to be happy and soldier on, especially when there wasn't a lot of baptisms, or even talking. I remember the first day that we taught a family, and that was actually the only day that I ever taught a family on my mission. We just stumbled on to a dad, and he's like, yeah, you can come teach my family. And we went in, and it was a mother, a father, a son, and a daughter. It was the only time on my mission that I ever taught a family. And that's something I don't think people would necessarily be thinking of either. The family, at least through my experience, was not something that the Estonians take. Like, they love their family members, but I wouldn't say that family is something that is strong there, and especially large families. I mean, there's one family over there that has 13 kids. Most of their kids have moved out and aren't at all active. I'm still in contact with a bunch of them, but they're not strong, and that's a big problem with the youth of the church, probably here in Utah as much as in Estonia. And the family system over there is not something that I would say they value to the point that most Latter-day Saints do. Family dynamics are a little bit weird. Guy living on one side of town with his mother, and his wife and daughter living on a completely other side of town, and they consider it normal. And it's not normal, I mean, to me. And so trying to teach somebody family dynamics and telling them that we can be together with our families forever is not it's a very foreign concept to them. And it's like them, and trying to tell somebody that you want this is not necessarily something they're going to initially grasp onto, which that was really hard for me. And when I was trying to teach people, I mean, you want to be with your family together forever, right? And, well, your family's not here, and like, they don't really seem, it was just hard, especially teaching the family aspect of the gospel to people in Estonia, because as much as they love their family, the family dynamics there are just whack, just so weird. Love them to death, but they're a bit odd.